What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Spark to Fire. I'm your host, Landon Rhodes, and today we have Jeff Noordhoek, the CEO of Nelnet, and my goodness, he knows me too well. IPAs, we've got beers from Kona. Thank you for bringing these on today. I appreciate it.
I want to set a new precedent of being on your show and, delivering a beer to make the interview more interesting.
This is smart, man. So future guests of Spark to Fire, make sure you understand that this is now the standard that Jeff is now trying to set. Thanks, dude. It's been a great episode.
All right.
So before we get started, I would love to, before we hear about Nelnet, obviously everyone's heard of Nelnet, but before we get into that piece of it, I'd love for everyone to get to know you a little bit more. So why don't you give us kind of the origin story of Jeff Noordhoek?
I grew up in the small town of Oakland, Nebraska, about 90 miles north of here. My family was very of low means. My dad was a Methodist minister. My mother worked in the nursing home there for about 20 some years. I think when she passed away, or when she left work in her 70s, she worked through her 70s. I think she was probably making $17 or $18 an hour. Mm-hmm. I think my dad, in any one year in his life, maximum probably made $18,000 a year in his life. So when I graduated from college, I realized that my first job at college, I made more than my father had ever made his entire life. But going back, I had a good childhood. 5 kids in my family, 4 boys and a girl. And I really believe in birth order. It has a big effect on who you are. Mm-hmm. And I was the 4th of 5, and I call it the kind of forgotten child in a good way, which was I was just under my parents' radar. They were so distracted with everything else in life. And so I had a lot of fun. I had 2 best friends that had a huge impact on my life, and they're still very close to me now and their families. So I was very fortunate with friendships, and I've had great mentors. But I would tell you, as a kid, I was hungry. I wanted to do more than was currently available to me. And so always looking for ways to grow and to make money. One of my stories that I talk about as it relates to entrepreneurship or going into business in life was I wanted a motorcycle when I was 12 years old. And so I said to my dad, I want a motorcycle. And like all good dads, he said, you can have one, but you have to pay for it, thinking that's going to be impossible. Well, I knew exactly what I wanted and what I had to make. And so I bean walked, detasseled, had a paper route, did every way possible to raise money and raise it all, and threw it down and said, here you go buy a motorcycle. He did. Yeah,
and he bought it. That's the Nebraska childhood though, right?
Yeah.
If you haven't done one of those things as a Nebraska kid, I feel like you're severely missing out on that good old work ethic.
It's true. I have a 14-year-old who detasseled this summer, and I think it's one of the hardest jobs I've ever had in my life.
Yeah.
It was a great motivator to having an office job.
Oh yeah. You appreciate everything so much more. Just that'll good old air conditioning, simple things, right?
Yeah. Air conditioning is great.
So you got the motorcycle.
Yeah. I got the motorcycle and, always worked through school, always had a job of some sort to support my, my fun activities in life. And then the big shocker for me, or the big kind of life moment, happened when I was my senior year in high school. My dad passed away at 49 years old of a massive heart attack. And I always tell a story because it comes in relation to, education and paying for education. So that fall, I went ready to come to school. There's only one option, which is University of Nebraska. That's all we could afford. And my mom said, I have $200, saved for you for your education. That's it. So I knew at that point in time, I had to work and borrow. And that's what I did. So I got down here and in Lincoln and started working and borrowed money. Back then, student loans were much smaller in size given the cost of education. Mm-hmm. And worked my way through school. About halfway through school, so right into my sophomore year, I took a job down here that definitely altered the path of my life also, which is I worked for a Union Bank.
Oh, okay.
And they had a great program for students, and you would rotate into different areas of the bank. And through that process, I met Mike Dunlap, who is the largest shareholder and executive chairman and previous CEO of Nelnet. So we met and we became roommates. And so the Nelnet ultimately comes back to a roommate story in college.
Love it.
Yeah. And so I graduated college, decided I wanted to get out of Nebraska and go see the world. Moved to Boston and applied at every bank or investment bank I could in the whole city. I knew I wanted to go into banking or investment banking, and ended up taking the first job that I was offered because I was out of money, and that was at an entity called State Street Bank. And State Street Bank is the largest mutual custodian in the world now. And when I got there, I remember thinking, you walk into an office space that is a tower, 30 stories tall, and the floor plates are whole city blocks. And there were thousands of people that did what I did, right? Which was loan accounting at the time. It's the cube farms as far as your eye can see.
Right.
And like all Nebraskans also, I decided, how am I going to separate myself from the rest of these thousands of people? And just started, as always, working hard and going above and beyond and being visible. I got very fortunate. I was very fortunate with mentors along the way, people I've met throughout my life, my career. I've always stayed in contact with because they're very successful people. And so stayed there for 7 years, worked in Europe for a year for them, worked in Canada for a period. Went to graduate school at night, got my MBA, and then towards the end of that stay, my old college roommate Mike came back and said, I need to borrow money because I worked at a large investment bank.
Right.
And we made that happen, and then we were done. He said,
how much money? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was $50 million.
$50 million.
Yeah, he had an idea to fund private student loans outside of the bank, outside of Union Bank. And he had gone to Wall Street. He'd met another person who becomes a very instrumental person in my life also. And they called me one day from New York and said, we're in New York. We've been all over trying to raise money for this idea. We can't raise money. No one will give us money. And so I said, come up. And they literally flew up to Boston that day. We met the next day and we figured out a deal. I went and sold my soul for them at the bank I worked at.
Right.
And ultimately in the end story is we gave them $50 million. When that was all done, Mike came back and said, this was really cool. I love how it works. I want to start a company that does this on our own. And that was the foundation of Nelnet.
Wow.
So there were so Mike started the company at $50,000 with 4 of us. And today we've grown that to 6,000 plus people with the, public book value of tangible book of over $2.4 billion. And the only money we raised in between all of that was when we went public in 2003.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you went from $50,000 with 4 people to over $2 billion and 6,000 plus employees.
And growing. We're not done yet.
And you're not.
Yeah, we're just getting started. I'm hoping.
That's just incredible to me. So when you came back, what year was that? When that all started? Because he had already kind of started in his own way, and then while you were still at State Street?
Yeah. So while I was still at State Street, we raised money to do this in a transaction that was outside the bank, but we had not started the company that became Nelnet yet. It was just a standalone financing essentially to do this. And so we started discussing the idea. I had gotten engaged and Mike said, hey, and Steve Butterfield, like I said, who's this instrumental person in my life, convinced me that you should leave the corporate world and come do a startup.
Yeah. And
my thought process was, when I was talking about this with my then fiance, who had been accepted to medical school, was most likely this will fail, like the vast majority of startups.
You started off with that thought, though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That with 4 people and $50,000 and this idea, it's kind of half baked.
Right.
Like all original ideas.
Right.
We're passionate about this really half baked idea, but I thought that statistically, startups, 7 fail, 2 do okay, and 1 does great. It's, when we invest in startups, that's kind of the mentality we think of.
Right.
So thought this, high possibility, but she was going to go to medical school, so she'd become a doctor, so we would not starve to death.
Right.
If this, in the worst case scenario, and of course it all worked out great. So so to make it more interesting for you, the story. So 4 of us were all in different cities. So we were a virtual company.
Right
4
from the
people
very
in the
beginning.
very beginning, 4 different cities. I moved to Chicago, so she'd go to medical school, And Mike was in Lincoln, Steve was in Scottsdale, Arizona, and we had another partner that joined us that was in Denver, Colorado. So we were a true virtual corporation.
Right off the get-go. And that was what year?
1996.
1996, guys, a virtual company back in 1996. And so my question is like, if you walked into this knowing, and like, that's pretty rational thought, you know, the 7-2-1 mentality of startups, but you helped them get this $50 million investment from your investment bank when you said you sold your soul. Mm-hmm. How in the world you're walking in, how do you acquire $50 million from someone? Like, what was that process like to get that?
Well, and that again was the original financing, and then a bunch of things happened after that. So my role in the company to start out was capital markets. So I was head of capital markets.
Right.
But with all startups, we all did everything.
Yeah.
You know, there's as you know, with your business now, we literally we were sales, we were marketing, we were operations, we were everything. And so, you know, but my expertise at State Street was financing companies, and that would have been not that big of a transaction at the time. Mm-hmm. Although what was different about it was there was no history. Usually when we finance a company, there would have to be a whole bunch of history, a bunch of data, a bunch of experience you could weigh upon. In this case, it was all based on character. So I knew that, you know, Mike's family here, the Dunlap family in Nebraska, had a great history and very high character. So I was able to use that, and then the business experience they had within student loans within the bank to figure it out. So, and I'd learned how to go in front of a credit committee and make a pitch, and where it gets shot down or it gets accepted by a bank who's taking the risk. And so this is a favor that was owed.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And then when we started the company, when we started doing transactions, that $50,000 was gone in about 6 months. We were getting ready to be, you know, no payroll. And then we did our first real transaction, recapitalized the company, and it just kept going. As we made money, we would borrow against it, leverage the company up, buy more loan assets, buy more businesses. And we just did that over and over and over.
And so what was your first transaction? Do you remember the value of it?
Yeah. Well,
numbers guy, right?
Yeah. Well, the amount of, so back then with student loans, and the world has changed, you could buy a portfolio of loans, say it at one price, and then you could finance it at a higher price. So every time you did that, you would take the net spread and you'd capitalize your company. You'd have cash coming in. Right. And so that first transaction that we did, that from where we were getting ready to run out of money, was right around $500 million. So we were going out and buying big portfolios and then doing big financings.
Right. So that was the top number then, the $500 million?
That was the total amount of loan portfolio that
Got
so
it.
it capitalized the company with a few $1 million.
Got it. Okay. So it's like 502 or something along those lines after capitalization.
Yeah. We never had a year with a loss in the entire history of the company. It was 24 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so what happens next after you get your first transaction done?
So then we grow. So we want to do it again.
Massive.
Yeah.
Growth.
So now we see how this happens.
And how many employees after your first transaction did you have to?
We were probably at 6 at that point in time. And then it was just a finance company, a virtual finance company. And, but then we started not only buying portfolios and financing them, we started buying companies. And that's when it started getting big. The first company was actually here in Nebraska, in Lincoln, called Neb Help. And we had about 30 people come over at that time. So suddenly we had a real payroll at that, you know, and started to have a culture, and we had to have a CFO and, you know, and everything else. And a lot of the people that lead our company now came over from that original acquisition. Wow. Like Jim Kruger, our CFO, Terry Hymas, our chief operating officer, were all from that original. So we've been together for 23 years.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So with that first culture, how is it different from like how it is today?
Oh, it's unbelievable how you evolve and change. We did install in the very beginning a set of core values, and we've never strayed from those set of core values. We had 4, and we added a 5th one, which was giving back to the community. And I know we'll get into that probably about what we're doing for the community, because it's core to what we do. Yeah. But this first core values drove all of our business decisions, and so that was always there. And we knew we had a strong culture, norms that we wanted to have, which is to be entrepreneurial, to how we invested in companies, how we treated people. Like our top 2 values, number 1 is the customer, right? The customer experience. You don't exist without your customers, and everything you do is to serve those customers. And number 2 is to make it an awesome place to work. So that means you're having fun at work, you're working hard, but it's awesome. And that's evolved over time also, just as we've gotten bigger and bigger and bigger.
What was fun back then compared to fun now? Like obviously now it's a lot more about, your environment. It's having a lot of just fun outings for the team. I mean, I don't want to talk about your culture. You'll have plenty to say about that, but how is like the things you're doing to care about those 30 people now scaled up to 6,500 people?
Yeah, I always say I knew everybody's name up to some point. And I've talked to David Graff about this at Huddle. I think he said that they got to about 400 where he just could not remember everybody's name, which I thought was incredible, way beyond my number.
That's really good. Yeah, he made it a long time.
He's extremely impressive on how he knows everybody's name that we run into. But for me, those early phases with that, it really was a family environment. And we worked together and played together and traveled together all the time. And so you just become so close with your associates that you work with. And so we always have been, we're super tight. I mean, it's been, people always talk about work-life balance. And I always say for me, there's no difference. It's all the same. It's just what you're focusing on at that moment in time. I mean, I think I have great work-life balance because they're the same thing. Nelnet's a part of who I am. It always has been,
Yeah.
So we would, there was a period where Mike and I and others, we'd always travel together on vacations. And at some point in time, we had to stop doing that because we were together all of the time.
Literally all the time.
All of the time. So we've probably done a better job in recent years of separating that type of stuff. But we would go out together, dine together, families would be together. I mean, it's tight when you're, as you're growing.
Yeah. And on the company wide level, how do you guys scale that caring to 6,500 people?
Yeah.
Because a lot of what you fight when you continue to grow is the fact that, people might say, God forbid, feel like they're just a number, right? So how do you guys fight against that? And how do you consistently find ways to make people feel extremely valued down to the very front lines of the company?
Yeah, there's multiple ways that I think you have to do it. And we're not always perfect at it, by the way, especially when you get an acquisition. It takes a while to integrate a separate culture into your culture, which is very important, obviously, to a successful integration.
Like Great Lakes.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Huge acquisition.
Very different culture that it's taken years to implement our culture in there, but I think it's being successful. I think the cultures are merging into a really positive
and they had how many people?
They had about 1,200 people.
1,200 people. Yeah.
It was our largest acquisition of people in our history. But no, the way I believe you do it is model the behavior at the top, right? If this is what I say I want it to be, you have to model that behavior. I think that, and those behaviors are actually being compassionate and caring about people, demonstrating that all the time. Leading from the front, being extremely visible, being articulate. I believe that successful companies, successful leaders have a vision for where they're going. They're great at communicating that vision, and they're bold and they're visible. I mean, those are my kind of core tenets. And so anytime I find that a pocket has sprung up in the organization that doesn't fit into our culture, I do my best to figure out why. Oftentimes it's a leader that doesn't agree with, or is kind of gone rogue or something like that.
Can you feel that when you walk into that portion of the office or something along those lines? Is that something that's like palatable?
Not immediately, but you can figure it out pretty quickly. You know? Yeah. And we have a really great group of people in terms of just they're nice. Like they're Nebraska nice is real.
Yeah.
And our people have filtered throughout we're in 20 different locations now in different countries, but that culture has spread to people. And I always find I can pretty quickly find out if something's going on and people are not adhering to what we want it to be. We do surveys and all that type of stuff, pulse surveys, annual surveys, and you can see it in the numbers right away.
Right.
Just, it comes out.
Yeah, because if it's greens across the board and all of a sudden you have like this deep spike of red, you're like, something's going on at that. Yeah. We've got a leader, somebody that's not aligned.
Yep, that's exactly what it is. Yep.
That's super interesting. And you mentioned something about entrepreneurship and having an entrepreneurial culture. Like being the CEO of such a massive company, have you always considered yourself entrepreneurial?
No.
Or is it something? Yeah. So I'm dying to hear about that. So
I still don't.
About it. You still don't?
No. Yeah, I don't. It was never the term entrepreneur never occurred to me.
It also didn't become popularized until the last decade. I feel like is like when it became cool to be an entrepreneur, from my perspective, at least from what I've seen.
I totally agree. Yeah. I came out of an era where there were all these business people, but you didn't call them entrepreneurs. They were just business people.
But was that almost a stigma? Like a negative stigma, like to be an entrepreneur, like say 15 years ago or 20 years ago?
I don't think so, but it was never like a popular thing.
Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, look at him.
Yeah, he's an entrepreneur. Or even the term CEO, like in those 15 years, it was never a term that people used very much, It was like, he runs the company or something like that.
Yeah.
She runs the company. But, so, now in hindsight, we're very entrepreneurial. We're starting new businesses, new products, buying startup companies, venture investments. We're in a lot of different things. And that really comes, I think, from Mike, our executive chairman, who is, the founder of the company. He is very innately entrepreneurial, and it's what he has fun doing. And that again, from that behavior, it gets modeled throughout the organization.
Right. And so how do you teach people to think for themselves that way? How do you teach people to think entrepreneurially?
Talk about it. You got to communicate. The key to growing the organization is communication. So you have to let people know. You have to be visible, and you have to communicate to them and let them know what you expect of them and of yourself. And I think that people in our organization see these people that are leading the company doing all these fun and cool things and spending time on new exciting things also, as well as maintaining what we've built. And I just think the behavior is modeled. And I think people come into the organization or they gravitate towards that.
Yeah.
I've had some recent people come in from the outside that we've hired, who've been growing so rapidly, that said that's why they came here. They believe that we're a big, stable company, financially stable, which is important to people, and it's entrepreneurial. A lot of times those are different concepts.
Oh yeah, because when you think startup, it's the opposite of stability.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the 7-2-1 thing you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
And so you mentioned extremely healthy company, very stable. What did COVID do to your business, and how did it affect you?
It's very fascinating to watch, and I could probably spend hours on this topic alone. But
I'm sure it's a lot.
So we were reluctant to work from home as a culture. We've always believed that being together in person in the office is always better than working from home. So over the years, people always said, can I work from home? Can I work from home? We had some pockets of that, but nothing large scale. When COVID hit, when we knew it was coming across in early March, we moved all 6,000 people home in 1 week. And that's in itself is an entrepreneurial event, right? We had all the technologists that had to make this happen, and physically, and the locations. And we process 50 plus million phone calls in and outbound in a given year. All that had to happen seamlessly to our customers, right? We had to have a customer experience where if you were calling us, if we were calling you, if we were corresponding with you, either, through chat or email or phone calls or whatever it might have been, that you had no disruption of service, which is exactly what we did. And so that was a Herculean feat from our technology teams to pull that off. And then we've been able to manage and make sure that there has been no disruption in customer experience across all of our businesses, which we do track. And it's worked. So that's been an unbelievable experience. As it relates to the financial aspect, all of our businesses are doing well. There's been no large impact. Some have had doing better than others. When we could talk about student loans and all that stuff, because there's a lot of stuff that happened with the CARES Act.
Right.
But the one that really was a COVID-19 hedge on our business, like in a positive way, was Allo. You could have never, never imagine that, because we went. Allo was a leap outside of what we do. I had a call with a large equity investor right before I came here, and they were talking about Allo being outside of the core of what Nelnet does, which is true. But when everybody in the world had to move to home, and that is work from home, study from home, teach from home,
be at home,
everything, the demand for high-speed internet, for broadband, is incredible. And Allo had to pivot, right? When this thing was happening in the beginning, they had to install a new customer, you have to go into someone's home, and there's potential for COVID, someone bring it in, someone having it. So you had to put all those protocols in place, which they adapted within days of keeping the customer safe and them safe to be able to install. They've ramped up sales and installations like you can't believe.
Well, not to mention load speed. Think about load speed changes from, oh, well, we know these residential people, like there's 70% of them or say 80% of them that are going to be going to a workplace location. Now they're staying at home and they're using their internet, their bandwidth all day long.
All day. And
that changes everything for them.
Everybody.
So how did they, and I'm specifically having Brad on to talk about that, so I don't want to take too much of that away from him, but I definitely want to see from your perspective, what was that like to watch that shake out?
Right. Well, obviously everybody's watching it because it suddenly becomes a life-changing event, right? Everybody needs this to live their life suddenly. If you didn't before, you do now, right?
Yeah.
You can't feed your family if you can't work from home. You can't go to school if you can't study from home. You can't teach kids, et cetera. And in my household, the kids are gaming at night and Netflix is on and everybody's working. I mean, the demand is unbelievable. The beauty of, and I'm curious to see what Brad says. Maybe we should block him from hearing this before he comes on.
Yeah.
But the beauty of a pure fiber optic network, which is what we have, the fiber can carry speeds it can go to 10 gig speeds. Like we're delivering gig speed, which is more than any of us ever need for anything at home. But the equipment exists on the end to end to turn up to 10 gigs, with investment.
That's incredible.
That's the beauty of fiber. And so there is no degradation of service across our system. It actually proved out what we had all thought was only theoretical in models.
This is like the massive test, right?
I mean, there's no greater.
Yeah, like this, you earthquake proof this test to say, all right, so what happens if everything at the exact same time all has to be on?
That's what we've proven out, and then the demand, and then the market figured that out, right? Too. I mean, the word of mouth across town is suddenly everybody knows they need Allo to have a happy life. Yeah.
I can count on one hand how many times I've had to call Allo. And I can count, and every single time I've called them, it's been a positive experience. And if, me and all my friends think that reputation is going to carry like wildfire, and I won't even list the competitors on here that you're probably destroying their market share or they're taking all of their market share. Yeah. I watch it happen every day, and it's like this wave of calm that goes over someone if they're going to work at a place where they know that they have an Allo connection. It's very strange. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that with like a coffee shop. They'll advertise it. We have Allo here.
And that's
got to feel great, right?
It does. Well, that's what we wanted, right? That's what we told them that should happen. You should want people to come to your coffee shop because, or come to wherever it might be.
Yeah.
It's very second rate. Yeah, it's very rewarding. And then Allo does a great job too but it's a Nebraska-based company also, which means they're focused on the product, delivering an amazing product, and service, right? The service is local. When they call, they know your neighborhood. They know who you are. I mean, it's a small town, right?
I have friends that work there.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so, really, like my childhood friend, my best friend from when I was a kid in Exeter works there. And it's really cool to see him have an entire career inside of this, and then obviously get to talk to you and Brad. That's a really cool thing. So
yeah, and that's the other thing too. We got all the top talent, right? When you have the best product and the best service, then suddenly everybody wants to move over to your company. So we're able to pick off great talent, and then just feeds itself. Yeah. So great story for Nebraska and for Nelnet. Yeah,
it's huge. Yeah. It's huge. So there's been, you probably deal with an unmatched amount of stress as a CEO of, having that many employees. You seem to carry yourself extremely well. You're a really confident dude, but it doesn't come off as arrogant or cocky. You're just like, there's this innate confidence with you when you talk to people that I've noticed. And I'm curious, is that something you developed over time, or have you always just kind of had that?
I think it's both. Yeah. I mean, my sister always tells this story. I was in like 8th grade when she got married. She got married right out of college, and she was president of her sorority, and she had all these sorority sisters who were bridesmaid. And I legitimately thought I had a chance at dating them at 8th grade, is what she was at the wedding. and her point on that was you had a level of confidence that was pretty high. That was you were out shooting your coverage there.
It's incredible.
Yeah, but so I would have to say I probably have always had it, but it's definitely it's always developed over time too. And I believe in leadership. I mean, people look to you, even when I lack confidence in something. I want to exhibit confidence because that people look to their leader, and if you don't have confidence, it scares them, So I think it's part of being a good leader is explaining and being truthful and honest of what you're facing as an organization or as a team or whatever's happening. But having confidence in where you're going is a great leadership trait, I believe, and I've tried to work on it.
It's the thought process of saying, this is a burning building, but it's going to be okay. we've got it. Like, this is okay. You know, when you're approaching a massive problem, they're looking for someone that has a solution, not the person that can make the problem just magically disappear.
Right. And that's exactly right. And this is, you know, we talked about this right before we started filming about some of the things that are happening in Nelnet. This has not been a perfect road all along, right? We have faced unbelievable controversy, events, you know, business is business, right? It's right. Fight out there every day. Mm-hmm. And so whenever you get into the face of one of those big, you know, events that are facing the company, you need to be confident in the decisions you're making. You need to, you know, make sure your people are confident also, or they'll leave.
Right. Yeah. Give us an example of something that's happened recently. Specifically, read some articles in the Journal Star that talked a little bit about that. Could you paint a little bit of color onto that, what you're talking about?
Sure. And I'll be hedged in my response a little bit because we are a publicly traded company. We are dealing with large government contracts. All this is public. So we built our business, the core business, on making and financing student loans. And particularly the biggest portion of that was student loans that were under the Federal Family Education Loan Program. I had a hard time kicking that out for some reason. The acronym is FFELP. Banks and finance companies would make loans. The federal government would subsidize those loans with guarantees so that you could do them at a low rate so students can go to school for a real low rate of interest.
Right.
Is the history of the program. In 2010, under the Affordable Care Act, they paid for that. So the administration paid for the Affordable Care Act with a bill that eliminated that program. Essentially, the government took over all student lending, or the vast majority, 90% of student lending in the country. Mm-hmm. So our core business at that point in time took a missile right to the side of the ship, right? Mm-hmm. The government nationalized our core business. Right. Luckily, we had diversified into a bunch of other stuff to help offset that risk. Mm-hmm. By the way, our third value besides customer service and make an awesome place to work is diversification of business. And so we tried to make, you know, lemonade out of lemons when that happened, which is the government could make the loans, but they had no capability of servicing them. They couldn't bill, collect. So they went out and procured servicers. And we were one of 4 entities that ultimately became 9 that won one of those contracts. That was 2010. At the end of the Obama administration, they started looking at restructuring the servicing contract. And then it flowed through and they left. It never got done into the Trump administration. And really, you know, summarizing 4 years of legislative change, they decided that they wanted to break up the whole process and have it one single system that all servicers used. And they would hire contractors like ourselves and others to do all the work on top of that system. Mm-hmm. So all the processing has to be done, all the phone work, et cetera. So they issued 2 procurements, and 3 entities made it down that could qualify for that large system. This is a monolithic system that would service $1.7 trillion in loans for 45 million customers. So the system literally has to have the ability to have 45 million people accessing it at any one point in time, 24/7, never be down. So we were a bidder on that process, and us and another competitor were eliminated on a technicality. And you can read about this in our public statements, which left one entity left, and it looked like they were going to potentially win. And even though it was a no bid procurement, essentially, because there was no one left but a single player.
Right.
So that obviously scares a lot of people in our company, as we have, you know, probably 600 technologists who work in some way, shape, or form to deliver the system as we have it now to the 17 million borrowers we have. So that goes into about confidence and where we're going, because we had to make public statements because we're a public traded company. This is a significant event.
Right.
About the potential loss of that business. That's when the newspapers start writing about it. So everybody started hearing about it. So our belief is in open communication, which is our 4th value, which is tell people how it is. Yes, this is not good.
Right.
And to disclose to our investors, yes, this is not good. Disclose the paper. Yes, this is not good. But it's not over. Right. And that's what I said in all those statements. This is not over. This is a long road. We're going to protest this decision. We know it's wrong. We know it's bad. And I'm highly confident still that it was bad. So we entered to the process of defending ourselves through the normal GAO process and government bidding. We have talked to our local congressmen and senators, as we have 3,500 people in Lincoln, Nebraska, in the first district.
It's a huge chunk.
Yeah, it's a lot of jobs, and our politicians stepped up. They fought for us and our jobs, as they should, and we fought for what is right because we know we have the best system. We know we should win it.
And the great service. I mean, that's the big thing is you guys have got incredible customer service, and you need to be the ones servicing those contracts.
Yeah, we're ranked repeatedly number 1 or 2 in the entire industry, quarter after quarter after quarter.
Right.
So the good news is they canceled that portion of the contract, and they will hopefully reissue it, and we'll have another shot at it. So, but it comes back to, being open and honest with your people, but yet confidently explaining we're not gonna let it end this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you had to, and that's what you talked about it, but maintaining that confidence throughout. That's really important. But you don't have like that. That's something in my mind that you build over time. I asked Joey Hausman, how in the world did you build up this confidence to walk onto a project and say, we're going to build you a $250 million facility? He said, I built confidence by putting myself in situations where I wasn't.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
Right. And he like you had a lot of that innately. He said I always kind of had that, like that level of just like shake it off type of confidence. Like I've just got it. He's like, but the really big stuff, the really scary stuff where you can be confident in those situations, it's just exposure, constant.
Yeah, it's good. And also I think, and I would assume that because Joey's product is a great product, our product is a great product. I knew we had a great product, right? It's not that we had an inferior product or inferior service, right? That something else was at play here.
Yeah.
So that helps with the confidence also. I would tell you though, everybody's human. When we got the news, we got an email, and there's a person that runs all of loan servicing, and we all these people report to him. And so we talked, and we, honestly, we, swear, had a lot of swear words coming out in the first 15 minutes with one another,
right,
privately on the phone.
Yeah.
Like what just happened, like how is this possible? There's no way that this is going down like this. And then what I told him, was you call me anytime, you say anything, we'll rely on each other. But when we start communicating with our team, we're going to tell them how this is, what's going to happen here. We're going to exude confidence. Mm-hmm. Is what we did. And we meant it. We were highly confident we would get a better outcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. So in your mind, when executives are leading people and these people are stepping up, whether it's just a normal everyday life or if it's like a really hard decision, what do you think executives are not doing enough of today? Like, what do you think they could all do holistically better to lead companies?
I think that most people are not visible enough. They
like to be in the shadows.
Or they're afraid of the communication. Or they're afraid of the way people will judge them. They're afraid to put themselves out there. Most of the great leaders that I look towards, they put themselves out there and not afraid of the negative side of how people view them. Who is
that?
Look at Elon Musk.
I was literally, it was on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah,
dude.
like he's just like he's so confident and he's so brilliant, but he's a quirky dude, But
he's willing to go smoke a blunt on Joe Rogan, and that'll that's something that absolutely had catastrophic effect the next day and the next week following. But at the end of the day, again, going back to that confidence of, it's like, we're going to figure this out and we're going to keep going as a company, whether or not you stay here. And that's a huge piece of it, I think, too.
Yeah. What I love about him, interesting enough, is like he thinks differently, which a lot of the people you've interviewed have. They think differently in the world. I listened to your interview about the guys who were on talking about Joe Ricketts, and I know Joe really well also. And he does think differently. He thinks bigger. And Elon Musk in this case, he believed that you could shoot a rocket up and re-land the rocket. He believes you could colonize Mars, and he'll probably colonize Mars.
Whether we like it or not. Or
you could create an all-electric car and sell them as your sole product, and no one else, thought that you could do that, or was, he just thinks at a level and then, wills it to happen. Mm-hmm. And I think there's not enough leaders out there who think that way.
Yeah. Who else do you look up to? Who else are like some of the leaders that you've seen throughout your life?
Well, obviously we've modeled our core business philosophies after Warren Buffett. I mean, how can you not in Nebraska? Like all the basic tenets of what we look for in an acquisition or an investment, great management teams, products we can understand, dominant market share, whatever it might be,
And is that through reading, or did you guys get a chance to meet him and talk to him a few times?
Yeah, reading, but I would give that back to Mike. Was when we were roommates in college, most people had some sort of rock poster, Playboy Playmate poster, something on their wall that defined them as a college student. We literally had a framed picture of Warren Buffett above our little fake mantle.
That's badass. That's awesome.
So it's from the.
I completely get it though.
Yeah.
I was talking to my buddy. I just took over like tiny little office space across the hall here, and my friends were like, you need to, your walls looking like serial killers, and then you need to get some pictures on the walls, right? And I was sitting here thinking, I'm like, really the only thing I can think of is a picture of Jeff Bezos when he's in his very first office and he's got a purple spray painted Amazon sign. Have you seen that picture?
Mm-mm.
I'll show it to you when it's over, but it's a picture of him and it's this crude looking desk. It's a literal door flipped on end and it's got 4x4 columns and just an old Apple computer with cables coming off of it everywhere and like a spray painted Amazon.com sign on the wall, like a banner. And I just look at that and think he was a millionaire at that point. Like he was literally worth millions and millions of dollars. It was like 96, 97. And he was still rocking an office like that. and that to me is like that scrappy behavior. That's just my favorite part about looking at those photos and relating back to them is remember what some of the best people in the world were doing when they were still worth millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah. What I love about Amazon and Bezos too is, and I don't know if you've ever met any of their senior leaders. We've had the opportunity to meet some of the people that work for them through various ways. One, we use Amazon Web Services for a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
and
AWS,
a large client.
huge.
Yeah. And he set out a set of core values, just like we have. His are a little bigger, but they apply every business decision to those core values, and they've stuck to them all along. And through when everybody was questioning that business and where it was going to go and what was happening, and it's been amazing how it's served them so well.
Yeah.
And they all buy into it. If you work there, you buy into this.
What are some of the core values that you notice with them that like really shine through?
Well, obviously their focus on the customer.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, just
the
obsessive nature of customer service, and they different from us. We always look at it as how quickly we can get to profitability. They always looked at gaining market share and delivering a product differently than how anybody else could do it. I mean, if you go back 10 years ago, you could never predict where Amazon would be today and how important it is to all of our lives and how easy they've made it to one touch buy anything on the planet. I mean, it is truly something that we all use every single day.
It was a quote from Jeff Bezos where he said, the competition can't put me out of business, but the customer can.
Absolutely true.
That right there. And when I've had friends ask me like, oh, your competitors are doing this, your competitors are doing that, or they got that contract, I'm just sitting here thinking, I'm like, and I had friends ask me, like, what about your customers? What do you think they're pricing at? What do you think they're doing? I mean, I kind of know. Not really.
Yeah. It doesn't have an effect on you.
What's that?
It doesn't have an effect on you, right? Yeah. You can control what you can control.
I'm way more interested to see what my client thinks of what our product is, more so than our competitors. I want to know why they're going to buy it for the next 10 years and why we're going to build 20, 30 year relationships with these people, not what they think of our neighbor's video.
Yeah.
Like how can we provide an unparalleled experience, and how can, video is just one part of that. And I think that's where we want to take it. And so that's what's so cool about interviewing people like you, that you've really taken something from nothing and watched it grow to thousands and thousands of employees. Mm-hmm. What do you think caused you guys to have this unique, is it just the people like that you started with? What caused you to think so differently than all of your competitors? And do you if you even think about your competitors at all, or how competitive is that landscape for you?
Yeah, we think about our customers as the top priority.
Right.
And I look at Allo, for example. When you interview Brad, that business, they were ahead of their time here. No one had invested in Lincoln, Nebraska. I won't mention them by name, but they hadn't put a dime of new innovation into Lincoln in 20 years. We were all being stuck. We had the 24th slowest internet speed in Nebraska in Lincoln.
In Nebraska?
In Nebraska. 24th slowest in Nebraska when we bought Allo. And by the way, now we are the 4th fastest internet in the United States. And the only 3 cities are ahead of us are Kansas City, San Antonio, and one other city, and they're all Google fiber cities.
Oh yeah, Google fiber.
Yeah. And if you look at the speed test, they're just barely. But but my point being is, the Allo business was definitely, if you go to the old hockey adage, they weren't skating to the puck. They were skating to the puck was going to go. And Brad and his team figured out where the puck was going to go. That this was it was going to become an insatiable demand for broadband, and that this wireless has obviously a real threat, 5G, but fiber was the key to the whole thing, is going to be for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And I think we did that. That's one example, but I think going back to your question, I think our management team is very diverse in their thought process. We all have different skills and that complement each other. And we, when the door is shut, we fight, right? We have open, honest dialogue, communication in a fair manner. But when we leave the room, we all run to the same tune, right? We run the call play.
Yeah.
And that's something that's hard as a leader too. Sometimes, even me personally, oftentimes I lose in that room. I'll still run the call play that the team decides is the best. And we have a very diverse skill set amongst us. And I think that's been the key to our success.
Yeah. What are the things that you're seeing leaders do correctly right now? Like you said something like they're not visible enough. What do you think some of the best ones are doing even outside of your company today?
One of the things that have made me proud about the business community in the most recent months has been the following of George Floyd's death. If you looked what happened immediately after that, and I'll tell you it happened in our company, and I'd be more than happy to talk about it.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, but I looked out, and that instant, I saw CEOs and leaders of big companies taking a stand, saying this is enough, right? That this has got to change. And there was a whole bunch of events leading up to that, obviously, right? There were all these different events that people were seeing, but it was accumulating to that where, a man was murdered on videotape for the world. Yeah, like it's just you suddenly say, I can't tolerate this anymore. I have to say something, right? Because you have customers and you have employees and associates, we call them associates, business partners, and people get worried that if they make a stand that they'll lose business. And corporate America really said this is enough. We Black Lives Matter, and I saw executive after executive get on the news and in letters and start saying, we won't tolerate this in our organization or in our society. And we did the same thing. We had we put a very strong statement out to our people on why we're supporting these causes, and then implemented a whole bunch of programs internally to help support diversity and inclusion.
Right.
And still ongoing. But it's been, it's an interesting tipping point, I think, in corporate America.
Yeah. Speaking of diversity and inclusion, you mentioned earlier when we were chatting that you guys have actively focused on just being more inclusive, whether it's having, splitting up the board decisions. Was it something along those lines where you had a certain amount of females in with the meetings with men? Or talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So this discussion of diversity and inclusion is not new to us. We've been talking about it for years. And the reason is we believe firmly that a company will fail if it's not diverse, right? You have to have diversity of thought. And so how do you get diversity of thought? It's to bring in people from different diverse perspectives. And for us, if you go back to that story when I talked about our start, it was 4 white guys. And then a lot of the companies we acquired early on or brought in were white guys. So we had a fear of groupthink. And in fact, like if you look at the top of our company, the top 5 companies, they're all white guys from small towns in Nebraska, right? So you really start getting this thought process.
Yeah, really bad groupthink.
And we had a lot of success with not deferring there because these were really bright people.
But we knew that to keep scaling, you talked about scale and growth from going from 4 to 6,000. And you know, I want to go to 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. I want to be a huge corporation.
Right.
So you have to bring in diversity of thought and perspective. You have to have a company and a management team that reflects your community and your customer base. And you have to think differently. So we really focused on this for over a multi-year basis. And every time one of our corporate board positions opened up, we would consider diversity as a key component. People have technology backgrounds or business backgrounds, and there's a ton of people like that out there, but did they come from a diverse perspective? So we started building it. Right now, we are, our board of directors is 50% female. I think it's one of the, we're listed on New York Stock Exchange, it has to be a small handful of companies that type of gender diversity.
Right.
We also have ethnic diversity we've been building in there also.
Mm-hmm.
In the companies that we acquire or that we're starting, we're making sure that the boards have diversity, and we're adding ethnic diversity within the Nelnet corporate board also.
Right.
So it's been something that we believe is just a critical aspect to having a successful growing business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I remember I was on a call with Robert Blackwell that I don't know if you were on that call as well with Jay and Robert Blackwell.
Well, no, it went so well though. We had Robert fly to Lincoln, and he met with our board and our entire leadership team, and he has challenged us on some fronts. Like one of the things that he challenged us to do and that we're doing in response is we're looking at our vendor list. Mm-hmm. We have 6,000.
You were just about to take this.
I took it from you. Yeah.
No, keep going.
We have 6,921 external visitors. I mean, our revenue is north of $1 billion.
External
vendors that serve Nelnet in some way, shape, or form, from the coffee to the copiers to the giant systems and everything else, and accountants, lawyers, et cetera. And after meeting Robert, we have him helping us, actually taking a look at our entire vendor list and seeing where we can move those dollars to companies led by Black people, you know, like people of color, and we're methodical about it, because his whole concept is the best way you can do it in this whole initiative is to create businesses in that community. And the way to do that is to do business with them. And so it was just a novel thought. We never looked at it that way. So now we're doing a full on review of this, and we're shifting dollars around, because with $1 billion, you know, our expense structure is in the multiple hundreds of millions. That's a lot of money we can pay out in contracts, you know, and to help, and why not, you know?
And I think that's really cool too. And I remember sitting down with him before that large Zoom meeting that he was on with Tony and Jay and all those guys. And I remember him specifically talking about, he's like, I think it was about North Omaha. Mm-hmm. And he just looked at me point blank. And because we asked him, we were just like, so what can we do? What can we do to help with this? And he's just, do business with Black people and hire Black people. It's like,
that's simple.
It's that, like, it's that simple, those two things. And I think people like to complicate it. And this is actually from him. I remember him saying this, is like, people like to make it really complicated. You just have to do business. That's it.
Basic. Yeah.
It'll take care, the commerce will take care of itself. The communities will eventually rise within that. And so I thought that was really, a novel thought, right? Just do business. So that's really cool that you guys are taking an initiative to analyze who you're doing business with and try and be a more inclusive. That's it, right? But that's the thing, is you're not only diversifying your investments, but you're diversifying your investments inside the community too. And so talk about everything else you guys are specifically doing community-based from a Nelnet perspective.
Yeah, this is going to be like 5 hours landing with that
question.
Yeah,
let's start the clock.
We'll start. So obviously, I talked about our core values of the customer being the most important thing, making an awesome place to work, being open in communication, diversified. And the fifth one is giving back to your community.
Right.
So we decided to, this is just the absolute start, was to set aside 2% of our profits to go into a foundation that we would use for charitable giving. Mm-hmm. Well, that foundation turned into north of $30+ million and growing, right? Incredible. We're a very profitable company. So that means you have a big pool of dollars to be able to contribute to your community. Then we pushed largely community service. So we have people time off, while they're at work on their work hours, to volunteer time. We match donations for every associate 1-to-1 and 3-to-1 if it's to an educational institution, because we believe in education is the key. Even with this Black Lives Matter initiative that came up. We call it Better Together, Nelnet Better Together. So we started an initiative called Service, Not Silence, right? So we want to serve and not be silent on these matters. We want to be forward in our community. We want to lead the community on this. So there were a multifaceted approach to it. But the first one was money. Like, how can we contribute? What can Nelnet do? One is we can talk about our vendors, right? We can start doing what we just talked about. But two is we can give money to the community and to these specific causes, like Black Lives Matter or the historically colleges, black colleges. I messed that up too, but historically Black colleges and universities. And we had a whole list of people, of entities that our people put together that were fighting for social justice and equality. And we allowed our people to donate to that. And every dollar they donated, we match it 3-to-1.
3-to-1.
And we set a broad goal out there of raising $1 million, and we hit it.
Man.
Yeah. So $1 million just to these causes on this thing was it's one of the powerful things we did.
But that's what happens when you have a great group of people, right? You can encourage that donation or showcase what it looks like to, and that probably all starts with you. I guarantee you were one of the first people to donate to that cause and make sure people know how important it is.
I actually, we had to set up a website, that would do it. And we filmed me filling it in,
I love it,
hitting it go. Here's my donation, and put that out to our people saying, I'm doing it. I want you to do it. So that's exactly right. It's exactly how we launched it.
So smart.
Yeah.
That's being visible, guys. Like, back to, like, for the listeners, one thing that you specifically said that people need to be doing a better job of from the corporate perspective and entrepreneurs is be more visible. You didn't quietly do that and just make people wonder, oh, I wonder if Jeff donated that money. You specifically made a video and say, hey, this is a great thing. I think we should all do great things. Go do great things.
That's exactly it.
That's it, right?
And then back to your question on community involvement. So we believe as a corporation from any size that you owe it to your community to be a participant in your community, right? That's business should be driving community involvement. So we encourage our people to donate their time, to donate their money. We're doing the same thing. We're leading by example. And we're affecting, tens of thousands of lives through that. We want to be in the forefront in our community, helping it grow.
Dang. That's pretty tough to end on a better note than that. I think you've provided so much value here today. Thank you so much for coming on today, Jeff. I appreciate you sharing everything, your experience and what you guys are doing with Nelnet and where it's going to go. I'd love if you could give a parting piece of advice to someone that wants to be an entrepreneur or they want to rise up in the corporate world. What's the last piece of advice you'd give to somebody?
You should be a constant learner. That every day goes by where I'm not a student. And so the day you stop learning is the day you stop growing. So just be a student of knowledge in any way you can get it.
Dang. Awesome. Guys, that's going to wrap up another episode of Spark to Fire. I'm your host, Landon Rhodes. And as usual, keep striking.